we'll continue from this moment in conversation. I couldn't agree more. To our first segment, which is Contested Roll. Contested Roll is the segment where my guest and I, we each take a side in a fiery hot debate that's tearing up the social media airwaves. Started too high. Started too high.
Yeah, more strange.
My guest will engage in, will take a hot take position in a fiery piece of discourse, sure to drive tons of engagement to the social post. Thank you, Andrew Bridgman.
I love how meta your setup is. It's like big booming voice worth of setup, and you're like, these are reverse engineered to do well on social media in order so that more people subscribe to the Dropout platform.
Our aims couldn't be more cynical, folks. We're engaging in a piece in a friendly debate. Don't actually engage in weird discourse. It's just a fun debate. Whatever position Sam takes, I will be sure to take the opposite. Sam, do you have a prepared hot take in the Ttrpg discourse?
Got it. So whatever I say, you have to take the opposite position.
That is correct.
Great. Birds are good. No, I'm just kidding.
Birds are fine. They're fine.
You're very well prepared.
Very well prepared.
Debate.
Fine.
If I did birds are bad, it would be worse for you.
Fuck! I love birds.
My hot take is I think that Nat 1's are more interesting than Nat 20's.
Elaborate on that. What do you mean? Why is a Nat 1 better than a Nat 20?
I think failure is more interesting than success. And I think that failure tells us more about a character and deepens a world, adds texture in a way. Why are you giving, what is this look?
Yeah, you would think that. You would. Oh, you love failure? What? You love failure? God, it seems like you love Nat 1 so much. You know what you should do on your show? You should do some episodes where it's impossible to not fail.
Where I basically engineer a game so that it's not winnable?
Yeah, if the dice aren't giving you enough Nat 1's, just fucking wait them.
Wait the ones.
Dice. Yeah, wait the ones. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, Sam. I disagree. Because I think honest effort should be fucking rewarded, okay?
Wow.
And listen, I've heard this. You are standing on terra firma. This is an adage, a truism. Yeah. It's a fucking saw that has existed in TTRPG spaces since time immemorial of failure drives story. Okay, put your players in a room with a puzzle. Right? Yeah. And watch as no one hits the Nat 20. And you tell me if that's easy to propel along.
Yes, that's fair. I mean, I think that you are you are a GM who does a very good job of turning failure into very funny and entertaining moments. And the majority of my experience watching TTRPG is watching you. So, my position, your fault, right? Which is like success is what's planned. So failure often involves like more improv. I respect the puzzle analogy lots. I will say being somebody who for a long period of time could not get a puzzle in one of your campaigns as a PC in that campaign, I'm pretty sure none of us had to roll in order to not get that puzzle.
Okay.
We were straight up just dum-dums.
Okay, in your defense, let me just say, and spoilers for Mice and Murder, Reika Shunker absolutely swept everybody's legs by correctly guessing the puzzle in the first half a second that it was given, and then said, no, that's impossible. As I went, what? It's like being on a New York City subway and watching just the train you need come and whiz past and not stop as you're like, this is the one I need.
I think that there is probably an experience that like your run-of-the-mill Dimension 20 audience member does not appreciate about being on Dimension 20 right now, which is knowing the fandom is the size that it is and wanting so desperately both to stay in character and stay in the story, which like you make very easy as a GM by being the immersive performer that you are, but also just not wanting to fuck up. And sometimes the pressured thinking just makes you make like wild decisions. Or
Yes.
you know what I mean?
Yes.
There is something that I would affectionately call D20 panic.
Oh no!
Sometimes.
Yes. Well, I feel that way. Weirdly, I feel that way everywhere except for right there.
Yeah, for sure.
Like the D20 panic is and I wouldn't even call it panic. I think that there is a weight of responsibility that didn't exist. Like, you know, you gave me a call in like August or September of 2017. And we're like,
whoa.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Oops.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Holy shit. Okay.
Death moves ever closer. But yeah, you gave me a call in like August or September. I remember where I got it. And there were 2 calls. The first call I think was actually in August because I was in upstate New York, having just gone back to work the first week at Wayfinder in a long, long time. And you were like, "Hey, great work on him. Actually, I think there could be a position for cast stuff opening up. I had just been brought on for Troopers. It was like a couple of things were happening. And then in September, it was like, we're going to make it official. We're hiring you as a cast member. And immediately it was like, okay, we're at a stage where it's crazy to talk about this, where it was literally a group of sketch writers, and it was like everyone here. Like, you spend your whole life being like, what if someone let me make a TV show? And then you get to work one day, and I've only been at work for 2 weeks, and it's like, actually, it's not it's mandatory. Everyone has to make a TV show.
Yeah.
And, you know, so it was like, we started Dimension 20 started ramping up. And I remember in those earliest iterations, with no show pre-existing it felt so free and fun. It felt like...
Totally. Well, in a way, there's a little bit of like, you've been training for this your whole life kind of thing, I imagine. I mean, to watch early episodes of Fantasy High, like, I think that was my impression. Like, I was watching like someone who had been taking violin lessons for 20 years perform their first concerts. And I think, like, it is very rare when anyone has the opportunity to produce a show that's just exactly in their skill set.
Yes.
You know? It's like we're lucky if we get any business in this town, let alone something that feels like eclipsed with our calling.
Yes. It's very rare in terms of there's nothing I sort of believe in more as a universal force than luck. I think it's like a precursor to being a sane and ethical human being, is to be like, there's a lot of luck out here in the world. And to be in a position where, again, I was seeking any steady income as a creator, entertainer, comedian, writer, and to then be like, oh, there's this company that's launching a platform that needs multiple kinds of long-form content. Can you produce hours of comedic improvisational content around a narrative crafted in the moment? And I'm like, what? I think yes. You know, like, I'm a teacher at UCB. I've been I was a LARP writer and a Mafia Don and all this stuff. It's crazy to look back on it in that way.
And then my response, of course, to Adam Frucci coming up to me and saying, like, Brennan is interested in maybe doing a Ttrpg show, was like, sure. I mean, I could not have been like less committed.
Perfect. Honestly, who could blame you? It sounds ill-fated. It really, I mean, like, that's the thing is there's, it is, I don't know if you feel this way. I do interviews about the show, and I can feel the inexorable pull of hindsight storytelling
Oh, sure.
You know what I
yes,
mean?
Totally.
When people are like, and what rare vision do you, as a noted success person, have? And you're like, well, it super didn't have to happen. And I don't know that there's any, like, you're saying, like, sure. For me, when I first heard that we were launching Dropout, I made a point to go and give my email and phone number to everybody, being like, well, we're about to get CISO'd, so it's nice knowing everybody.
Totally.
And here we are in the year of our Lord 2024, being like, seems to be going okay.
Yeah, it really didn't have to go this way. It feels
really
like a weird like game with death. It's like some sort of like, oh, we just picked like the right shell with the marble under it. And here we are. I really relate to that. Like, there are so many happy accidents along the way to where we are now.
You might even call them Nat 20's.
You
Gotcha, motherfucker.
son of a bitch.
Gotcha.
How did you do that?
Or
Which
would
is
a Nat
why-
1 have been more interesting?
Hey, we might be more interesting people. In my defense.
In my
if it
defense.
hadn't gone as well,
Oh
we
my
might have a
God.
lot more character.
a lot more grit.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure, man.
But I did spend a whole lot of my life developing grit, working at a Renaissance fair and doing 3 months of background work for Law and Order and doing a children's theater tour.
I was a camera PA on Law and Order.
I know. It's funny that we didn't cross paths.
Mafia.
Maybe we did.
Maybe we did. Do you remember where you met me?
Yeah, Brennan, I remember where I met you. I met you in or around Chelsea Piers.
There we go!
And I know this because you told me.
I told you on an episode of Breaking News. No, our lives, it's very fun. Our lives have definitely done a lot of dove to the Mafia Don thing. No, but the thing I'll say that's interesting, and especially to extrapolate out to life, because everyone gets their Nat 1s and their Nat 20s, I think Nat 1s have a feeling to them, they make each other special. When you have when you have that Nat 1 come up, I think some of the greatest moments of comedy come from Nat 1s, and nothing endears us to a character more than a Nat 1.
Totally. I mean, I will say, this is more on the topic of like our professional journey than it is even on the topic of Nat 1s versus Nat 20s, but the only way to maximize your luck, because so much of this does feel like luck, is to roll a lot.
Yes.
And so something that I tell people is, and I think that this is kind of the situation that we put ourselves in with Dropout, or endeavor to, is how can you put yourself in a position where you get to roll a lot?
Yes.
How can you sort of, knowing that like a lot of this is luck and a lot of talent is inherent, and a lot, talent gets better over time and with practice.
Yeah.
Can you be prolific instead, like focus on being prolific instead of...
Dude, I think about this all the time, specifically with the thing that I think is a big cultural conversation right now about work ethic. And I see a lot of interesting things, so I'm in very progressive spaces online, and there are genuine...
Cool. You should come hang out where I hang out. I got some subreddits you should subscribe to.
I feel threatened and uncomfortable. Oh no! But finding like these spaces where sometimes it's unclear how people feel about work or labor, because there's a weird thing of. I even like there's a little.
Oh,
thing,
I know what you're saying.
Like in an adventuring party, I remember like Siobhan was making fun of me for being a workaholic and was like, "Oh, you love capitalism," and I had this weird cling, like a weird dissonant chord in my head, where I was like, "Well, work is not capitalism. Capitalism is the exploitation of another's labor. The exploitation is the bad part, not the
work.
Work, like things do need to be created. Like food needs to get moved from point A to point B. Like work is beautiful.
For sure.
That's a beautiful thing. And it's the fact that we denigrate certain kinds of work and don't celebrate all work that is like so painful and hurtful and that it gets exploited. And talking about getting a lot of chances to roll the dice, I definitely feel that way in terms of like my own relationship to when I was like working on them, actually, you
Yeah.
know, like I submitted to be a cast member at College Humor, had my Tim Curry eating pizza.
Incredible. To this date, my favorite thing I've ever done. No, just kidding.
No, honestly, I get it. Hot crisp crust. So silly. I remember putting those fishnets on in my bedroom to record on my Mac camera, being like, "What the fuck am I doing?" But within that context, like when I first, you know, it like, and I got thanked for it, and I think some people reached out and said some very nice stuff. And then like a month or two later, it's like, come write questions from actually. And I remember writing those and sitting there and watching the cast members go off to shoot sketches and be like, "That looks really fun."
Yeah.
And I wrote twice as many questions than I ended up delivering from actually, and I would delete tons of them just to get to the best
ones.
And there's this weird thing in
Yeah.
that of like looking at that work ethic, and I think about it's that weird thing that I juggle in my own head around, is that healthy or unhealthy?
Yeah.
But I think I talk a lot about it too with just in terms of like having the understanding of opportunity will come at some point.
Yeah.
Like, in other words, you're going around the carousel and there's a brass ring and you don't know when it's coming and you don't know how many times you're going around the circle. So what you need to do is work so hard that you are levitating at brass ring. You need to jump and just through will hover at brass ring height through pure exertion of energy. And is that healthy? That's for mental health professionals to determine.
It is. I'm sure there are like better routes to where like we've ended up maybe than where we've ended up. But I do feel this way in which, like, given the fact that we're all playing this capitalist game, we're all forced to, that there is a way in which you have to almost like leverage your job back into power at some point. And it's very hard to start from like a raw position of power. Like let's be very clear about this, stole College Humor's influence.
Yes.
And are now running with this machine.
Yeah.
But like the capitalist machine invented College Humor. If we had all tried to do this from scratch, very different story.
Very different story. And I think too, it's that thing where, as I like talking about that kind of like, how do you give yourself as many roles as possible to hit that nat 20? And it's grueling.
Yeah.
And it's a feeling too of like, you know, in hindsight, like I've talked about this a lot, especially because like the same thing when I was like doing twice as many questions from actually, I used to, when I was working as a tape logger at The Daily Show, I was literally transcribing C-SPAN footage.
Yeah.
I used to do double the amount of bins of anyone else and stay till like 3 or 4 in the morning, being like, they'll notice that I'm doing twice as many bins. They never noticed. And, or if they did, they said, great, now we don't have to hire this guy again for another week, you know, because he did all that extra stuff. So, but in other words, you look back and you're like, I see wasted effort. There was an easier way to get here that wouldn't have been so grueling. But that guy didn't know
that.
Yeah, like, I didn't
absolutely.
Know that. So how could I, like, what could I have imparted to be like, hey, take it easy until you move to Los Angeles in 2016, where the opportunity will present itself to suddenly.
All you're doing is maximizing your odds.
Yeah, you're just maximizing odds. Let me roll as many times as I can. Damn. And that's why nat 20s are.
Totally. We really stuck on theme. You're welcome, Andrew.
Hey, Andrew, you're fucking welcome, dude. And that's Contested Roll.